The explosion shook the ground like an earthquake, sending chunks of concrete and twisted metal flying through the air. Dust clouds billowed across the marketplace in Kandahar, transforming the busy morning into a scene from hell. The improvised explosive device had detonated near a fruit vendor's stall, where civilians had been going about their daily business just moments before. Team Alpha had been conducting a routine patrol through the area when the bomb went off. The 6 Navy SEALs immediately took defensive positions, their training kicking in automatically. Lieutenant Marcus Reed, the team leader, quickly assessed the situation through the settling dust. Bodies lay scattered across the marketplace, some moving, others ominously still. "Medic!" someone shouted from across the square. The voice was desperate, filled with the kind of panic that comes when death feels too close. Hospital Corpsman Second Class Sarah Martinez grabbed her medical bag and sprinted toward the sound, her boots crunching over broken glass and debris. At 28, she had seen her share of combat zones, but the sight before her still made her stomach clench. A young woman lay pinned beneath a fallen beam, blood pooling beneath her head. The injured woman appeared to be in her early 20s, wearing traditional Afghan clothing that was now torn and stained with dirt and blood. Her long black hair was matted with dust, and her face was pale from shock and blood loss. What struck Sarah immediately was how the woman's eyes remained alert despite her injuries, scanning the area with an intensity that seemed unusual for a civilian caught in an explosion. "I've got you," Sarah said softly, kneeling beside the woman. She began her assessment, checking for obvious injuries while keeping one eye on their surroundings. The marketplace was still chaotic, with other wounded civilians crying out for help. The beam across the woman's legs was heavy, requiring at least 2 people to lift. Sarah signaled to Petty Officer Jake Wilson, one of her teammates, who rushed over to help. Together, they carefully lifted the debris, freeing the woman's legs. Sarah noted that despite what must have been excruciating pain, the woman hadn't made a sound. As Sarah worked to stop the bleeding from a deep gash on the woman's forehead, she noticed something odd. The woman's hands, though dirty from the explosion, showed calluses in specific patterns. These weren't the hands of someone who spent their days cooking or cleaning or working in the marketplace. The calluses were positioned exactly where they would form from extensive weapons training. "Can you tell me your name?" Sarah asked in broken Pashto, one of the few phrases she had learned during her deployment. The woman looked directly into Sarah's eyes but remained silent. There was something in her gaze that made Sarah pause. It wasn't the confused look of someone in shock, nor the grateful expression of a rescued civilian. Instead, there was a calculating intelligence, as if the woman was studying Sarah just as intently as Sarah was studying her. Meanwhile, the other team members were securing the area and helping other wounded civilians. Sergeant Tommy Rodriguez was coordinating with local police who had arrived on scene, while the rest of the team maintained a defensive perimeter. The explosion had been carefully timed to cause maximum civilian casualties, a hallmark of Taliban operations in the region. As Sarah continued treating the woman's wounds, she made another discovery that sent alarms through her mind. Beneath the traditional clothing, she could feel what appeared to be a tactical vest. It was well concealed, but Sarah's trained fingers recognized the familiar texture immediately. Civilians in Afghanistan certainly didn't wear body armor to the marketplace. The woman must have sensed Sarah's discovery because her muscles tensed slightly. For a moment, their eyes met again, and Sarah saw a flicker of something that might have been concern. Still, the woman remained completely silent, not even acknowledging the pain from her injuries. Sarah's mind raced as she applied pressure bandages and prepared to move the woman to a safer location for further treatment. Every instinct told her that this was no ordinary civilian caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The silence, the calloused hands, the hidden body armor, the alert and calculating gaze, none of it fit the profile of an innocent bystander. As she worked, Sarah became aware that her teammates were starting to notice the woman as well. Lieutenant Reed had finished coordinating with the arriving medical evacuation team and was now observing Sarah's patient with professional interest. The woman's behavior was certainly unusual. Most civilians would be crying, calling for family members, or at least responding to questions about their condition. The evacuation helicopter was approaching, its rotors creating a thunderous noise that echoed off the surrounding buildings. Sarah knew they would need to move the woman soon, but something told her to take a closer look before they transferred her to the aircraft. Pretending to check for additional injuries, Sarah carefully examined more of the woman's clothing and equipment. What she found made her heart rate spike. Concealed in a hidden pocket was a small but sophisticated communication device. Military grade, not something any civilian would possess. The woman was watching Sarah's every move, clearly aware that her cover was being blown. Despite her injuries, there was no fear in her eyes, only a cold professionalism that Sarah recognized from her own training. This was someone who had been in dangerous situations before. Someone who knew how to maintain operational security even while wounded and potentially captured. Sarah's discovery presented a dilemma. The woman was clearly not what she appeared to be, but she was also severely injured and in need of immediate medical attention. Sarah's oath as a medic required her to treat all wounded regardless of their identity or allegiance, but she also had a duty to protect her team and report potential threats. The helicopter had landed now, kicking up dust and debris across the marketplace. The medical evacuation team was approaching with a stretcher, ready to transport the most seriously wounded to the military hospital. Sarah had only moments to decide how to handle the situation. She looked down at the woman one more time, noting that despite everything, the injured stranger was still studying her surroundings, still calculating, still very much aware of every detail around her. There was definitely more to this woman than met the eye, and Sarah had a feeling that transporting her would lead to complications none of them were prepared for. Sarah made a split-second decision. As the evacuation team approached with the stretcher, she subtly signaled to Lieutenant Reed, using hand signals that indicated a potential security concern. Reed's expression didn't change, but Sarah saw his hand move slightly closer to his weapon. During the helicopter ride to the forward operating base, Sarah continued monitoring the woman's vital signs while keeping her suspicions to herself. The mystery patient remained conscious throughout the flight, her dark eyes taking in every detail of the aircraft's interior, memorizing faces, noting equipment locations. Most civilians would be unconscious or delirious from their injuries by now. At the base medical facility, Sarah helped transfer the woman to the trauma bay. The military doctors immediately began their assessment, but something strange happened. When Dr. Captain Lisa Chen began speaking to the woman in fluent Pashto, asking standard medical questions, the patient suddenly seemed to understand far more than she had let on earlier. The woman's micro-expressions betrayed her. Sarah had learned to read people during her medical training, and she caught the split-second recognition in the patient's eyes before she resumed her act of not understanding. This woman definitely spoke Pashto fluently, possibly even English, but was choosing to remain silent for reasons of her own. Dr. Chen ordered X-rays and blood work, standard procedure for blast victims. As they moved the woman to the imaging room, Sarah noticed something that made her stomach drop. The woman's right ankle bore a small professional tattoo, coordinates that Sarah recognized as marking a location deep in Taliban-controlled territory. The X-rays revealed even more troubling information. The woman had evidence of old fractures that had healed without proper medical treatment, consistent with someone who had lived a hard life in remote areas. More concerning were the foreign objects visible in her body, what appeared to be old shrapnel fragments that had never been removed, suggesting previous exposure to combat situations. Sarah pulled Lieutenant Reed aside during a quiet moment. In hushed tones, she shared her growing concerns about their patient. The tactical vest, the communication device, the calloused hands, the coordinates tattoo. Individually, these might be explainable, but together they painted a picture of someone with extensive military or insurgent training. Reed listened carefully, his expression growing more serious with each detail. As a SEAL officer, he had encountered enemy operatives before, but rarely in such circumstances. The woman was clearly injured and in need of medical care, but she was also potentially dangerous and definitely not who she appeared to be. The team leader made a quiet call to intelligence officers at the base. Within an hour, 2 agents from military intelligence arrived at the medical facility. Captain James Morrison and Sergeant First Class Amy Chen began their own assessment of the mysterious patient. The intelligence officers were skilled at reading people, and they immediately noticed the same inconsistencies that had troubled Sarah. When they attempted to question the woman through an interpreter, she maintained her silence, but her body language revealed someone comfortable with interrogation situations. Dr. Chen reported that the woman's injuries, while serious, were not life-threatening with proper treatment. The head wound would require stitches, and she had a mild concussion, but nothing that prevented her from being questioned once she was stable. That evening, as Sarah completed her shift in the medical facility, she decided to check on the woman one more time. The patient was awake, staring at the ceiling of the medical tent. When Sarah approached, the woman's eyes tracked her movement with the same calculating intensity as before. "I know you understand me," Sarah said quietly in English, ensuring no other medical staff were within earshot. The woman's expression didn't change, but Sarah caught a slight tension in her jaw muscles. Sarah pulled up a chair beside the bed. Something about this woman intrigued her beyond the obvious security concerns. There was an intelligence in her eyes, a strength that suggested she had overcome significant challenges in her life. "You're not Taliban," Sarah continued, speaking softly but directly. "Your equipment is too sophisticated, your training too advanced. The question is, who are you really?" For the first time since the marketplace explosion, the woman's composure cracked slightly. Sarah saw a flicker of surprise, followed quickly by what might have been respect. It was clear that the woman hadn't expected a military medic to be so observant or direct. The woman remained silent, but her eyes seemed to be evaluating Sarah in a new way. There was something almost familiar about her expression, as if she recognized a kindred spirit in the American medic who had saved her life. Over the next few hours, military intelligence conducted a more thorough search of the woman's belongings and clothing. What they found confirmed Sarah's suspicions and raised entirely new questions. Hidden in the lining of the woman's traditional dress were documents written in multiple languages, including what appeared to be intelligence reports about Taliban movements in the region. The communication device Sarah had discovered was even more sophisticated than initially thought. Technical analysis revealed it was capable of encrypted satellite communications, far beyond anything typically available to local insurgent groups. The device had been used recently to send coded messages to locations across the region. Most intriguing was a small leather pouch found sewn into the woman's clothing. Inside were photographs. Not family pictures, as might be expected, but surveillance photos of known Taliban leaders and their compounds. These were high-quality images that could only have been taken by someone with significant access to enemy territories. Captain Morrison briefed Lieutenant Reed and his team about the discoveries. The woman was clearly involved in intelligence operations, but for whom remained unclear. The evidence suggested she might be working against the Taliban rather than for them, but confirmation would require more investigation. Sarah found herself thinking about the woman throughout the night. There was something haunting about her silence, something that spoke to a deeper story. The woman had endured her injuries without complaint, had maintained operational security even while wounded and potentially captured, and had shown no fear despite being in enemy hands. The next morning, Sarah returned to check on the patient and found the woman sitting up in bed, alert and watchful. The head wound was healing well and the concussion symptoms had largely resolved. Medically, there was no reason to keep her in the facility much longer. As Sarah performed her routine medical checks, she made one final discovery that changed everything. Hidden beneath the woman's hair, at the base of her neck, was a small scar. Sarah recognized it immediately. It was the distinctive mark left by a specific type of military communication implant, technology that was only available to the most elite special operations forces. The realization hit Sarah like a physical blow. This woman wasn't a civilian caught in an explosion, wasn't even a Taliban operative or local intelligence asset. The communication implant, the sophisticated equipment, the professional training, it all pointed to something Sarah had never encountered before but had heard whispered about in intelligence briefings. Standing before her, wounded but maintaining her cover with unwavering discipline, was quite possibly a foreign special operations officer conducting deep cover operations in Taliban territory. The question was no longer who she was, but which country had sent her and what her mission entailed. Sarah's discovery of the communication implant scar created an immediate dilemma. If this woman was indeed a foreign special operations officer, then holding her could create serious diplomatic complications. However, releasing her without proper verification could compromise ongoing operations in the region. Lieutenant Reed was immediately briefed about Sarah's findings. Within hours, the situation had escalated far beyond the base medical facility. Secure communications were established with higher command, and by evening, a team of senior intelligence officers had arrived via helicopter from Bagram Air Base. Colonel Patricia Williams, a veteran intelligence officer with decades of experience in the region, took charge of the investigation. She had dealt with similar situations before and understood the delicate nature of international special operations cooperation. Her first action was to order increased security around the medical facility while maintaining the appearance of routine medical care. The woman's condition had improved significantly, but she maintained her silence with remarkable discipline. Even when faced with senior military officers and intelligence specialists, she showed no signs of breaking character. Her commitment to operational security was both impressive and concerning. Dr. Chen reported that the patient was medically stable and could be moved if necessary. However, Colonel Williams decided to keep the woman at the forward base while they attempted to establish her true identity through intelligence channels. Sarah found herself assigned as the woman's primary medical monitor, partly due to her familiarity with the case and partly because the patient seemed most responsive to her presence. It was during one of these monitoring sessions that the breakthrough finally came. A coded message arrived through secure channels that evening. Sarah wasn't privy to the full content, but she could see the immediate change in Colonel Williams' demeanor. The intelligence officer's expression shifted from suspicion to something approaching relief, mixed with professional respect. The woman was summoned to Colonel Williams' office for a private meeting. Sarah accompanied her as the medical escort, ostensibly to ensure her patient's continued recovery. However, she suspected there were other reasons for her inclusion in such a sensitive briefing. Colonel Williams dismissed the guards and activated electronic countermeasures to prevent surveillance. For the first time since the marketplace explosion, they were in a completely secure environment. The change in atmosphere was immediately apparent. "Agent Zara Nasiri," Colonel Williams said, addressing the woman directly in English, "your embassy has confirmed your identity." The woman, who had maintained absolute silence for 3 days, finally spoke. Her English was flawless, with just a hint of an accent that Sarah couldn't quite identify. "My cover was compromised by circumstances beyond my control." "The marketplace bombing was not part of your operation," Colonel Williams stated. "It wasn't a question." Zara shook her head slowly. "I was meeting with an asset when the device detonated. The target was likely the asset, not random civilians. My presence was coincidental." Sarah listened with fascination as the truth finally emerged. Zara was indeed a special operations officer, but not working for any enemy organization. She was part of an elite international counterterrorism unit operating under deep cover to infiltrate and disrupt Taliban networks from within. Her mission had been ongoing for 8 months, during which she had successfully identified several high-value targets and prevented multiple attacks against coalition forces. The intelligence she had gathered had saved countless lives, both military and civilian. "The communication device your medic discovered," Zara continued, glancing at Sarah with what might have been gratitude, "contains intelligence about planned attacks against 3 coalition bases. The information needs to be transmitted immediately." Colonel Williams nodded, understanding the urgency. "Your handler has requested immediate extraction. There's a helicopter standing by." "No," Zara said firmly. "My mission isn't complete. There's a major operation planned for next week that I need to prevent. If I disappear now, my contacts will become suspicious, and the operation will proceed." This created another complication. Zara's injuries, while healing, were still significant. Dr. Chen had recommended at least a week of recovery time before she could return to any strenuous activity. Returning to deep cover operations so soon could be dangerous. Sarah found herself speaking up, despite the sensitive nature of the discussion. From a medical standpoint, she needs more time to recover fully. The concussion symptoms could return under stress, and the head wound is still vulnerable to infection. Zara looked at Sarah directly for the first time since revealing her identity. "I appreciate your medical opinion, but lives are at stake. I've operated under worse conditions." Colonel Williams considered the situation carefully. The intelligence Zara had gathered was invaluable, but sending her back into the field prematurely could result in her death or capture. Either outcome would be unacceptable for both operational and diplomatic reasons. A compromise was reached. Zara would be given 2 additional days to recover, while military intelligence worked to verify and act upon the information she had provided. During that time, her cover story would be maintained. She would appear to be a civilian recovering from marketplace injuries. Sarah was assigned to continue monitoring Zara's medical condition during this extended period. It was during these quiet moments that she began to understand the true scope of what Zara had undertaken. Operating alone in enemy territory for months, maintaining a false identity while gathering critical intelligence, required not just courage, but an almost superhuman level of mental discipline. Zara had been living every moment knowing that discovery meant certain death, yet she had continued her mission with unwavering dedication. "Why do you do it?" Sarah asked during one of their medical sessions. Zara was quiet for a long moment. "My family was killed in a terrorist attack when I was 16. Not by the Taliban specifically, but by people with the same ideology. I joined special operations to ensure other families don't suffer the same loss." The personal motivation behind Zara's dangerous work made her sacrifice even more meaningful. She wasn't just following orders or serving her country. She was fighting a personal war against the kind of extremism that had destroyed her own life. On the final day of Zara's recovery, intelligence officers confirmed the accuracy of her information. Based on her reports, coalition forces had successfully intercepted communications about the planned attacks and were preparing countermeasures. Her work had potentially saved hundreds of lives. As Zara prepared to return to her mission, she thanked Sarah for her medical care and for maintaining professional discretion about her true identity. There was a mutual respect between the 2 women that transcended their different roles and backgrounds. The helicopter that would return Zara to her operational area arrived at dawn. As she prepared to board, still maintaining her civilian cover, Zara paused to speak with Sarah one final time. "In my line of work, we rarely see the direct results of our actions," she said quietly. "But knowing there are people like you, Medical professionals who save lives without asking questions about politics or nationality reminds me why this work matters. Sarah watched as the helicopter disappeared into the morning sky, carrying Zara back to her dangerous mission. She knew she might never learn the outcome of Zara's operation, but she also knew she had played a small part in something larger than herself. Months later, Sarah would read intelligence briefings about successful operations against Taliban networks in the region. She would never know for certain which ones might have resulted from Zara's work, but she took quiet satisfaction in knowing that her medical care had helped an exceptional woman continue her vital mission. The experience changed Sarah's perspective on her role as a combat medic. She had always understood the importance of providing medical care to anyone who needed it, but her encounter with Zara had shown her how that simple act could have far-reaching consequences for peace and security. Years later, when Sarah had returned home and transitioned to civilian medical practice, she would sometimes think about the wounded woman who had remained wordless for 3 days. It served as a reminder that heroism comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most important battles are fought by people whose names will never be known.